Profit Designers, we have been producing the Profit by Design podcast now almost 3 years with a weekly episode. And for the first time, we are going into our vault and going back through our most popular episodes and re-releasing them. I think you're going to find a lot of value from these conversations. And I believe these are some of the most important conversations for helping you move your business forward. One of the things that you may not know is that when I record the Profit by Design podcast, I really think about our clients and our Better Business, Better Life program at Tap the Potential and what is going to serve them well in what we're supporting them in doing in creating a business that gives you time for what matters most and allows you to have more money in your bank account than ever. Every one of these episodes is chosen with that in mind. So we are on a brief hiatus at the Profit by Design podcast to allow me to get a little bit of downtime and much needed R&R in addition to some big things we're cooking up at Tap the Potential. So our team needed time to focus on the upcoming Better Business, Better Life Summit. You'll be hearing more details about that very soon. And I am working on the Audible version of the 4-week vacation. So enjoy these episodes, and I will be back with you very soon.
If we got everybody up to a consistent level, it didn't have to be perfect, but if we even brought the people doing it, ad hoc and averagely compared to the top performers, let's at least get everybody up to follow the top performers process. And then that kind of freed me up to think, well, maybe I don't need to be the one doing the systems. And
you work hard in your business. On the Profit by Design podcast, we ask the big question. What has your business done for you lately? Hi, I'm Dr. Sabrina Starling. I'm the business psychologist, the author of the 4-week vacation and the How to Hire the Best series, as well as the founder of Tap the Potential, where we coach entrepreneurs like you to design sustainably profitable businesses that give you more time for what matters most and more money in your bank account than ever. Because after all, we believe work supports life, not the other way around. Weekly on the Profit by Design podcast, we bring you tips, tools, and strategies from our own experiences and from the experiences of our guests who are entrepreneurial thought leaders and real life entrepreneurs, all to support you in making intentionally profitable and sustainable business decisions to live the lifestyle you desire. Get started on your journey with us by downloading the training so many entrepreneurs are talking about right now, how to make your time worth $10,000 an hour at tapthepotential.com/10K. David is passionate about systems, and it's not just about systems for him. He really wants business owners to have freedom in their business. In our interview, he shares the story of why that is so important to him. It's a compelling why. It's one that I can definitely relate to and connect with. On today's episode, we actually talk about a surprising benefit of getting your business systemized where you don't have to be there, something that you may not be paying enough attention to. So I think you'll be pleasantly surprised as we get into that in the interview. So with that, let me share with you David's bio. David's entrepreneurial journey begins back in his early 20s when he sold Australia's most loved sporting ground, the Melbourne Cricket Ground. Since then, his business experience spans from franchising retail clothing stores to founding one of Australia's most trusted digital agencies, MelbourneSEOservices.com. In 2016, he successfully systemized himself out of the business, hired a CEO, and stepped back from the daily operations. Through this process, he became a systems devotee, founding System Hub and Systemology. Today, his mission is to free all business owners worldwide from the daily operations of running their business. Recognized as a high-achieving entrepreneur, you'll find many of David's keynote presentations on YouTube, including TEDx, WordCamp, and ProBlogger. So with that, let's listen to the interview. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's definitely a pleasure.
I really want to dig into your journey and your experience because you have quite a story. You systematized yourself out of your business after 17 years, and now you're on to another venture. That in itself is pretty interesting. So you tell us a little bit about what prompted, at what point did you decide, I need to stop being in the weeds of this business? What was the event that led to that?
A turning point for me was finding out that we were pregnant. And when my wife got the news and I got the news, and then I started to think, how many hours do I actually spend working, evenings, weekends? I was probably doing a good 70-hour week, 70 to 80-hour week. And I just thought, I don't want to be that dad who's always too busy, doesn't have time to walk the kids to school or make them breakfast or hang out. And I remember really clearly at that point, I thought, other people have figured this out. Why am I stuck in this little repetitive loop? I must be doing something wrong here, and I've got to break out of that cycle. So that was probably the biggest turning point for me.
Wow. I really relate to that because that was my turning point too, is the point that I was pregnant with my second daughter. And I thought, the first time around, I started my business and I had a baby. And I remember reading the E-Myth while I was rocking her to sleep at night. And I was already reading that E-Myth, seeing there's so many things wrong with this brand new business that I've just started. And I don't know what to do about it. So the second time around, I decided I'm not going to have that experience again. I want 9 weeks of maternity leave. I want to be present with my child. And then I want to continue to be able to have that presence. So I totally connect. And I hear that so much from business owners, that there's a life event that wakes us up, and that the way we're doing things that's worked so far isn't fully functional, and it really doesn't serve our life. And there's something else. And what is that something else? What are these other business owners who are doing this? What do they know that I'm missing? So for you, that got you started on a journey to figure this out. What happened next on that journey?
I'd already intuitively knew that systems, processes, and systemizing the business, like intuitively, I knew that was a way out. Like I had a background prior to that business in sort of the stock market and learning how to trade and creating trading plans, which is, you think about upfront, their systems. You think about what criteria do you look for to get in, and what criteria do you look for to get out of a stock, and how do you determine your position sizing? And you think all of this up front, so that way when you're in the moment and the emotions are about to take over, you can just follow your plan and your system. So I kind of felt like I had that DNA. And I also had another business that I was involved in, which was a rock and roll clothing music store of all things. I know you're based over in the States, so imagine like a hot topic, but we were building the Australian version of that over here. And my business partner at the time, they were big fans of the E-Myth, and they had built up that business with the idea of franchising it and rolling it out. We got it up to 3 stores. The third store was franchised, and we had sold it off. So I'd seen the way that a systemized business could work. But for whatever reason, in this new business, which was a digital agency, which I got stuck in it was probably actually I was probably stuck in the operations for about 11 years or thereabouts. And I thought for some reason that business was different. I thought, hey, we're in the online landscape. Google is changing all the time. Algorithms are getting updated. Things are moving really quickly. I was very much the subject matter expert, so I built this business around me. Whereas some of those other, with the rock and roll clothing music store, I had the business partner. He was the expert when it came to understanding the industry and the trends and all those sorts of things. And I was one step removed. Whereas because I built this business around me, that's really how I got stuck. And I just got used to solving all of the problems. And I built a team up around me. Like at that point, we had a good 10 staff around me doing different things. But whenever problems happen, they'd come to me. Oh, Dave can solve it. And I would solve it. I love to solve the problems, but I created these bad habits for myself and then also for the staff. And it just further locked me deeper and deeper into that business.
Boy, do I relate to that. I've been there. I know this pain. And, I have a saying that we teach people how to treat us. And it does. It feels great to solve problems. There's an adrenaline rush. I think there's even oxytocin involved in this. There's all kinds of chemicals going on that make us addicted to the problem solving and wanting to do that. And then we just unintentionally design these businesses that depend and need us to keep doing that. So what I heard in what you just said is a key limiting belief. That is, this business needs me. And my business is different. That's something all of us say at some point. Those things that other business owners are doing that are working for them, that's great for them. My business is different.
Yeah, I actually found like there's a range of these different myths. Like the more I started to dig into it, so, I got out the E-myth and started rereading Traction and Built to Sell and Work the System and Scaling Up. I was reading all of those books and I was trying to think about, well, how do I systemize this business? I know that's the way forward. I know that's the way that I have to do. Why do I keep having these hang-ups? And I had things like thinking in my head that I was going to need hundreds of systems, and I was busy enough as it was right now. How am I going to find the time then to start to do the documentation? And I thought I was going to be the person who was creating all of this documentation. And then I was worried as well. I thought, even if I create these systems, are my team even going to follow them anyway? Because at the moment, everybody's kind of doing things their own way. Some things we kind of had set, but it was still a little bit loose. And I was worried because of the type of business we had, this digital agency, a lot of the work that we did was creative work. And I thought, introducing systems and processes has the possibility of maybe removing that creativity and would undermine it. So I had all of these blockages floating around in my head that I just needed to start to almost like retest. I just got used to thinking those myths were there and that was the baggage that I was holding on to. And then it wasn't until I kind of looked down and realized, hang on, I don't have to be holding this bag. And I kind of let go.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I have a little test that I've learned to rely on. And that is whenever I start to hear myself say, it's just the way it is. That is my red flag that, oh no, sister, it doesn't have to be just the way it is. There could be another possibility. And so I've started listening when our clients say something and they say, that's just the way it is. We got to accept this. Oh no, we're going to examine that assumption.
Once I sort of started to test those, that kind of really got me to re-look at the way that my business was working. And I thought, this business has to work without me. I needed to get clear on, well, what are the products and services that I could see that we are selling that could be delivered without me? How do we get very clear on what that deliverable actually looks like? And then ultimately for me to step out, I needed to find, the yin to my yang. I needed to find that operations person. Like, I'm a visionary founder. I'm great at seeing a problem, getting very clear on how we can solve that for the clients. I can jump into the future, imagine what the end picture looks like. And then it's coming back to the moment, even though I can do the details, like a lot of business owners, you can kind of do everything. That's the good thing about a business owner. You kind of just do it. Whether or not you're any good at it or not is another thing. Like, that's another thing I kind of discovered the more I kind of headed down this journey. All of these things that I used to think I was really good at, I actually used to think I was a very good people manager. I thought I was awesome at it until Melissa came on board, who ended up being our operations manager, and she still runs that business today. And I realized I'm not as good at managing people as I thought I was. It wasn't until I saw someone who was good at a particular task that made me realize that I still had a lot of work to go.
Yeah, there's something so beautiful about getting people in our businesses and putting them in a role that aligns with their strengths and seeing what they can do. And I've had very similar moments where I've seen, like, our success team lead who does our sales. He's phenomenal. And I used to think I was the only one who could do sales. And I thought I was really good at sales until I saw what he's doing. And I'm like, wow, look at him go. I love seeing that. So those were the initial steps and how things started to evolve for you and some initial epiphanies. Did this just happen overnight? Was this a long process? Like, how long did it take you to systematize yourself out of the business?
It took the guts of it. Like, I tried to push incredibly hard in that that 9-month period for the pregnancy. Realistically, it ended up taking a little bit longer than that. It's probably closer to that sort of, I'd say 12 months or maybe even sort of 15 months. And what we did, like I got very clear on, those core products and services, and we got very clear on what are the systems required to deliver that. Then we tried to get clear on, well, who on the team has the knowledge? Because I already had the team members working with us. So I wanted to try and see, could we extract out of their brains what they were doing? Because at least if we got everybody up to a consistent level, it didn't have to be perfect, but if we even brought the people doing it, ad hoc and averagely compared to the top performers, let's at least get everybody up to follow the top performers process. And then that kind of freed me up to think, well, maybe I don't need to be the one doing the systems. And as I kind of went further through the process, then I made a couple of other insights. I started to realize systemization works better as a 2-person job. You've got the person who has the knowledge, and then you have the person who does the documentation. So we would record tasks getting done, then we would give it to another documenter who would do version 1, and then it would go back to that knowledgeable worker, and then they would be able to tweak it and edit it. Because everybody loves to edit. Very few people like to start with a blank page, and usually your best team members are busy at the best of times anyway.
Let's stop there and just kind of unpack that a little bit, because when it comes to putting systems in place and getting team members to document systems, that's a point of resistance. A lot of business owners come back to us and say, I can't get my team to document this. I don't know. So you're saying one way around that, or one way to facilitate that process, is to have 2 people. So the person doing it is telling, or the person there's somebody capturing what the person who does it is doing.
That was huge for us, because it then freed up, like we got people to do things like screen recordings. I even started doing some work with some other clients who started using this process as well, and they were doing some stuff more in the field. So they had people going out with like a GoPro camera, just recording the experienced team member doing their thing, and then they could bring the recordings back, and then that would end up getting documented. So that aim of the game really for your team members is to make it as easy as possible for them to just do their thing and capture it and do the documentation. Because a lot of people, especially your best team members, they don't have enough time. They're busy like you are, and you need to try and make that process as easy as possible. Once I had that insight, the other thing I started to do, which was interesting, I thought, a lot of the problems I probably have in business right now have been solved by someone else. So if you can identify what the problem is, you can seek out the expert or the consultant who's already solved that, who's got the system and the process figured out. You can interview them, and then I give it to another team member, then they do all the documentation, and now we have version 1 of a great system that we've basically just, leveraged off another consultant.
So I really want to kind of underscore something here, that you're bypassing a big objection we throw up in our head is, I need to sit down and I need to type out step by step everything that I do for this particular activity. Who wants to do that? That's so boring and tedious. None of us want to do that. So you're saying, get a GoPro, get a video camera, talk it out, let someone just capture what's happening, and then those steps can be captured in that process.
Yeah, and that becomes version 1. And the more you start to do this, you realize some things need to be documented in more detail than others. Because sometimes you'll talk to, systems-based people, and if they, we are the rare few who really connect with the idea of systems, and they can be very detail-orientated. And I see them end up doing overkill, and then they heavily document things. They do screenshots at every single step of the way. They create flow charts, and they just go completely overboard for something like, here's how we take out the trash. And you're like, do we really need to go to that level? So you have to think about, and you start to learn, well, who's going to be following this process? How often are they going to be doing it? Are we going to be recruiting for new people to do this role on a frequent basis? It'll dictate the level of detail you go to. Sometimes you just start off with a collection of videos. That's a great place to start. Then you might pull out a few of the key bullet points, and then next time someone does the tasks, they make a mistake or have a problem. Okay, well, let's add that now in as a sub-bullet point on that particular step to make sure that issue doesn't happen again. So it's I think, yeah, sometimes, again, people have this misconception of systemization. Maybe they've looked at something like, ISO certification, and they're required to do these detailed systems and have, every single thing immaculately detailed and have version control and, appropriate sign off. And they just overcomplicate all this. For small business, that's where I see the biggest gap is, if they're thinking about systems and processes, they're thinking about, some lean methodology, or they're thinking about Six Sigma, and they just completely overkill. They're designing systems as though they were a big multinational, or they were, someone in manufacturing, and, they've got these workers going through these particular things. And small business is at the other end. And that's where we kind of need to think about what are the minimum viable systems required for the business to get the result. Do that. Add in some great people, and then you start to get some magic happening.
Yes. Minimum viable system with great people. And then you hone and refine from there. Now, I started chuckling, and I know people can't see me on video, but I started chuckling when you started talking about these detailed systems. And I was remembering the lead flow chart that I designed for our team that we were going to use, and how people were going to flow from lead to prospect to client. And it was color coded, and it had these squares and circles and, arrows going this way and that way. I thought it was a work of art, and I was so proud of it. I showed it to a few colleagues, and they were all, yeah, this is a fantastic system. And I showed it to my assistant, who was going to execute the system, and I think she was ready to kill me. And so, minimum viable system is a place to start, and then test it out, and then see what needs to be added, add the bullet points or whatever, but don't overdo it. That is a wonderful point that you're making, David. How did you know you were ready? When you could say, this business is systemized, I can be away. How did you know?
So we identified the person. I was lucky enough that they were already in the organization, so I didn't need to recruit externally for the CEO to take over that business. So Melissa, she was internally, I'd done some work with her previously. So in that rock and roll clothing music store business that we had, she was one of the partners in that space, but she'd come on board this business more in sort of like an employee role for the digital agency. So, but I knew she had a deep understanding of small business and running teams, and she'd already started to level up in the business, and she knew the direction that I wanted to head. Like, we were clear on the values and getting clear on the dream and what the company was here to do. And she bought into that, and she was helping us to fulfill that. So I'd found the right person. That's probably really key. That's the first thing, finding them. And then I did take some little vacations here or there. What was strange, it was almost like, and it's something that I've realized now, probably the biggest thing about getting your business systemized and get it to a point where it can work without you is, once that happens, you start to realize there are a range of other opportunities that are circling around you that you may not have noticed before, because you were so focused in on those day-to-day operations. You didn't look up to look around what was happening. And oftentimes I see that with a lot of business owners. Sometimes you'll have the best opportunity knocking at your door, but you just can't take advantage of it. So the opportunity, completely random, that happened for me. So here I was, we just systemized the business. I had our first child, and I'd just written my first book called Authority Content, done a book launch, and then I get an email from someone, Luzdelia Gerber. Now, I knew the surname Gerber, and I thought, okay, surely this couldn't be. I had a look at the URL, and it was Michael E. Gerber Companies, and it was an email that just said, call me, and then had a phone number in it. Now, I was looking at my emails first thing in the morning, so it was 7 a.m. I knew it was in the afternoon on the west coast of the States, so I just called it, and then I started having a chat, and lo and behold, she said, yeah, look, have you heard of my husband, Michael E. Gerber? And I was like, yes, a little bit starstruck. And I said, yes. So, I mean, I know this is a podcast, so you can't see, but I am holding up the E-Myth book right now. And so I was well familiar with his work. And she said, well, Michael's just turned 80. He's finished his final book called Beyond the E-Myth. It's the first book that we've decided to self-publish, because Rather than going through HarperCollins, we want to maintain the rights and we want to kind of do some things with the marketing. And she said, I happen to be watching your book launch. She goes, I don't know how I came across it, but I watched you do this book launch and I watched you launch it on Amazon and get the Amazon bestseller. And she said, can you do that for Michael? And I said, I don't launch books. This is not my thing. But look, I've got a bit of a system now in place because I've gone through and I've tried it with mine. And I said, yeah, I'd love to. Like, what an opportunity. They didn't know the work that I was doing, which we haven't really touched on. I have what was a hobby business at the time, which is now my full-time thing, but System Hub was my hobby business that we kind of built up in the background. So she had no idea my background with systems and processes and the direction that I'd already headed and stepping out of the operations, plugging Melissa in, and now about to double down on System Hub. And she said, okay, well, can you do this book launch? So I said, yeah, okay. And I spent the next 3 months, completely stepped out of my business, put Melissa in charge and said, you run this business. I'm going to focus on this full time. And it was amazing just to work with Michael, to mention his name and have just doors open up. Like, I'd send an email to someone saying, hey, Michael's got this new book launch coming up. Would you like to interview him for your podcast? And it was whirlwind. I was doing, those 70-80 hour work weeks again, but I was doing it on someone else's business. And at the time, and I don't know if it was a good idea or not a good idea, but at the time I said I'd be happy to do it for free, just for the opportunity. So I actually volunteered my time for 3 months to work on this project. And then we launched the book and it got Amazon bestseller. I flew over to the States for the launch. Michael was running, he's got a handful of events that he's running called the Dreaming Room. This is one of the last he's running because he's just past 83 now, I believe. So he's kind of, getting to thinking about his legacy. But I went over to that and it was just got to have that whole experience, spend some time with them. And then to cap it all off, like, talk about just, you couldn't have made this happen, even if I waved a magic wand and said this is what I would want to have happen. His wife said, at the end of all of this, would you like to run the company?
Oh, my goodness. What?
And I was like, thank you for the opportunity. There is no way my Maltese wife with her family in Australia would allow us to move to the States, which is one of the things that would be required to make this work. But it was just an unbelievably amazing journey that, for me, came out of this idea of systemization. It was the biggest lesson I got, is once you start to systemize and you get your business to that point in time, it means you could take advantage of these opportunities. Because if she knocked on my door not more than 6 months, 9 months earlier, there is no way that I would have been able to say, yes, I'll take 3 months off, I'll work 80-hour work weeks on your business and not get paid.
Yeah, my jaw is dropping. I had no idea that you were going to share this story and the connections here.
No.
And this is fascinating. So I'm just imagining, like, myself hunkered down, working on my stuff. I've got a book launch we're getting ready to, and, I'm like in the weeds, and I'm thinking now, what opportunities am I not noticing because I'm in the weeds? And our profit designers, as they're listening, I imagine they're thinking about, what if Michael Gerber's wife is calling me? Would I notice the surname? Because sometimes we're so busy, we don't even catch those simple things, So you had this opportunity. And the other thing that I want to point out is you volunteered your time. That is an A player characteristic right off the bat. When we start talking about what are A players like and what do, they look for opportunities, and you valued that opportunity so much. It wasn't about the money. It was about the experience and the connections and what this could lead to. And that was the value there for you. Am I understanding?
Yeah, it was more of like a journey of like personal growth, and those opportunities don't fall in your lap every single day. So I just thought, what could I do to over deliver? And I think that's probably one of the things that contributed to her saying, I can see you are an A player, would you like to run the company? And that, I don't think that would have happened if I went in there and said, hey, yes, I do book launches. It costs $30,000 and I'll work 20 hours in the week and I want to fly business class over to the States, please. So it was, I think just valuing more the opportunity and understanding, I suppose, in business, there's a lot of serendipity that does happen, connecting with the right people, talking to the right people. You need to be ready to see those opportunities and take them. And it was the same with another thing, and I know we talked about it just prior to recording. I happened to have another experience that happened just prior to that as well, which was I got invited to go do a TEDx talk over in the Netherlands. And that was a case of, you have to fly yourself over here. We won't pay you. This will probably be the most amount of work that you put into an 18-minute presentation that you do. You'll have to do all of this, and we've got hoops that you need to jump through. And I thought, do it anyway, because that opens up the door. Like they are the biggest leverage points in business. That's where the business owner needs to operate, because oftentimes the business owner is the only person who can take advantage of those opportunities and leverage them. And that's really what we're doing with systems. We're creating space for that.
Yeah. And, the thing that I hear a lot when I talk about the 4-week vacation is business owners will say, I like what I do. I don't want to have to not be in my business, and I don't know what I would do for 4 weeks. It's really not about the 4-week vacation. It's about the freedom to be away and to find those other opportunities, and to create the space for serendipity to work, and for us to notice when serendipity is right there in front of us and seize those moments that are so powerful. And these are some pivotal moments in your career that have happened because you seized serendipity.
You touched on that point for the business owners. When I went through the dreaming room with Michael, which is that event that he ran, I kind of did a lot of work on my dream, because it almost felt like a fresh, clean slate. I'm just about to really start focusing in heavily on System Hub. And I thought, right, what is the dream that we're going to look to achieve if System Hub and Systemology is to be a success? And, I was struggling with these ideas of, the freedom for business owners and putting them on the beaches and chilling out and all those sorts of things. And I thought the dream we got is to free all business owners worldwide from the day-to-day operations of running their business. That's really the dream here. It's not necessarily to put them on the beach. It's to give them the freedom to make that choice. Because I know a lot of business owners, myself included, I enjoy working. I just want to make sure that I'm working on the things where I've got my unique ability and where I can add the most value and make the biggest impact. And that isn't in solving reoccurring problems that are created and caused inside my business. I need to get out of that. So that's what we do. We free people from the operations, and then they can do their best work.
So let's talk a little bit about your why. Why is this so important to you?
Yeah, I've kind of been digging deeper into that to figure out where all of this came from. And it stems back to my dad, who was, the small business owner, worked from home, had this big office down in the rumpus room, and he was always working, whether it was, morning, noon or night. Like, he'd work late into the evenings, the weekends, just always thinking. Like, he was a visionary. So he was always dreaming about what the big picture was, and it was all consuming. And I just remember countless times being, sitting by the soccer field waiting to get picked up, and I'd be there for 2 hours. This is prior to mobile phones. So it's kind of like you don't text to say, where are you? I'm sitting there waiting to be picked up, just because he didn't really have any concept of time or didn't have any awareness of it, or I'm not too sure. It was just caught in the moment on whatever he was doing. And I just always felt like I was waiting. I always felt like he was never there. And it's funny, a few things like that, I look back now, things that happened in my childhood. Sometimes there are some things that are examples and then some things that are warnings. And I feel like a lot of the lessons I picked up were warnings of, I don't want to live like that. I don't want to be too busy for the kids. Another big one was around money. We were always, back in the day, he was having trouble with money. And I thought, I don't want to live like that. So I wanted to create a business that money wasn't the center discussion and not having enough. So I think that was almost like a lot of a moving away strategy. I think that was a big part. I think with his passing, he passed a good few years ago, I had started to reflect. I used to look back and think I saw him as a warning in a lot of examples, don't live like this. But in hindsight, I realized everybody's a combination of warnings and examples. So there were other great examples of things that I look at. And he was actually a systems engineer. That was his job. So it's kind of funny the direction that I've headed and I've fallen into. And the more I look, there are definitely a lot of examples as well that I follow from his direction.
Well, he's human. Like all of us, we have our good points and our bad points. And so the way that he was showing up as your parent at the time when you were a child, you saw some of his weaknesses and you experienced the other end, the impact of those weaknesses. And at the same time, you learned some wonderful things from him. I happen to know from watching one of your videos that the scorecard, the allowance, I can't remember the exact word that you have, it's the weekly allowance scorecard taught you a very important lesson in life that you've carried forward with you. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, the sheet. This feels a little bit like a therapy session.
Let's go back. Let's get you on the couch. We'll go back to the past.
The sheet was the first system that I ever remember seeing, and it was a system that my dad designed for my brother and I. He figured that to raise great humans, there are certain activities that they should be doing on a repeated basis. It related back to his values. So there were things that he valued in life, whether it was, being good to your brother, cleaning your room, saying your prayers, going to bed by a certain time. Basically, he created this sheet where you could earn points for taking different activities, and he'd basically just circle them, and then at the end of the week we would tally all up the points, and then there was a legend on the back of the sheet which could then show you how much pocket money you're entitled to. So he basically gamified life for my brother and I as a way for us to earn our pocket money. And he even got really elaborate. He got to the point where if you scored over 300 points for 6 weeks in a row, then you'd unlock bonuses and things like that. So it got really fancy, and it got to a point like I embraced the sheet. My brother didn't love the sheet at all, but I embraced the sheet, and I got to the point where he had to change the rules slightly because, in his words, he said I was bleeding him dry.
Oh, wow.
Figuring out how the game was played. But that was another really important lesson. And again, it's always with hindsight. I look back now, my brother didn't like the sheet and he didn't follow the sheet. And that's okay. It's when you're building your business, you're finding people that resonate with the way that you want your business to run. If you want a systems-based business, you find people who resonate with this systems-based thinking. So I probably wouldn't hire my brother.
That is such an important point. And I also find that there are different people who are right for the business at different phases of the business. So in the early startup phase, somebody who doesn't play by the rules, who's able to think quick on their feet and come up with solutions on the fly, that's a great person to have on the team because there's so much of that going on. And then as you grow and you need to get systems in place, that might be the very person who looks at that scorecard and says, not for me. I'm not playing that game. And that's okay.
Yeah, it's definitely different. And I find that's one of the biggest challenges for business owners is you need to change as a person as the business begins to grow. Because oftentimes at the start, you are coming up with those ideas, you're solving problems quickly, you're rapid moving, you're solving and over delivering for clients, you're micromanaging. And the reason you micromanage is to deliver the great result for the client, which then makes them a raving fan of your work. But then what ends up happening is if you get stuck there, then you start micromanaging and you have trouble letting go, and you can only grow to a certain size, and you don't let your team step in, and you can't systemize and step back, and then you kind of get stuck. So I almost feel like at every stage in business, the business owner needs to reinvent themselves, break those bad habits. And it's hard because those bad habits are often the things that have contributed to their success that gets them to where they are, which that's what makes it really hard to break.
Yes. And I hearken back to one of our previous guests on the podcast, Steve Bousquet, who said, you're never there. We are never there. We're never done. We keep thinking we're going to get to this level in the business and these issues are going to go away. But then we're challenged to grow again. And we have some new things that we have to learn. And those bad habits because they served us and got us to that level, become the hardest and to let go of and change. And I think about when it comes to systems, the development of a business like a child growing up. So when a business is a startup, it's a baby, and we have to pour all of our energy into taking care of that baby, rocking it to sleep at night. Everything is dependent on us. And then over time, that baby needs to grow up and become an adolescent. And at that point, there's some things that adolescent can do. You can trust them. You can leave them sometimes for hours on end and they'll be okay. But go away for a weekend and leave your 13-year-old at home and see what happens. See what you come home to. It's probably not what you want to come home to. And so that's our business that doesn't have all the systems yet in place. And we can leave it for a short period of time, but longer, not quite. And I actually think in terms of bad habits that we have to break when we start systemizing, the biggest one is codependency. We are codependent on that business. Our identity starts getting wrapped up in our business. It's a reflection of us, and our inability to be away from it. It's kind of like empty nest syndrome. If this business can run without me, who am I? And what do I do with my time? And that's where what you talked about just making yourself available for serendipity to happen. That's where we start to discover, well, who are we when we're not the business owner? I think about who am I when I'm not the coach at Tap the Potential, and who is David when he's not the founder of System Hub. That opportunity to really discover who we are is the freedom that comes with these systems.
Yeah. And it's funny when you grow a business, you kind of feel like things just bolt on and happen, and you kind of just grow it organically. Here's a problem, stick this on. Oh, here's something that's going on, let's add this. And you kind of just grow it organically. I feel like with System Hub, because I'd created that space and Melbourne SEO is running and still runs, and we got it to a point where it just kind of hums away, does its thing, throws a little bit of profit off over the top. I only have to do half a day a week in there to kind of just make sure that I'm across everything. When I've started System Hub, I've started it with very different eyes this time, thinking more in terms of impact and why am I doing it, and being much more strategic, thinking about what's the order in which I'm doing things that are going to get the quickest result early, and sometimes things that, when I first got started with Melbourne SEO, I didn't think as much about, the dream, the purpose, the mission of the company. I didn't think about getting those values right up front, and, we kind of bolted them on later. Whereas this time, all of that thinking goes up front.
So System Hub solves a big problem for business owners. So I'd like you to talk a little bit about System Hub.
Yep. So System Hub is a home for businesses' systems, processes, and standard operating procedures, just to have them all in one place, centrally located, get them out of Dropbox or Google Drive or sitting on someone's desk as a Word document or, in someone's head. It's just a place to try and centralize it and simplify. I think that's the biggest thing. I know, some people, you can kind of make it work with Dropbox. You could kind of make it work with Google Sites, but a lot of these things aren't designed for that specific purpose. So they're a little bit clunky. They're not necessarily streamlined. They're confusing. You don't get controls all the time over who can see what. You can't set up roles. Oftentimes they can't handle all of the rich media that you might need for a system, whether it's an email template or a video, or you want to insert a Lucid chart, or it's a specific platform to house all of those systems and processes. We don't try and be project management. We're not trying to be Asana or Basecamp or anything like that. System Hub works alongside those tools. So it's just a matter of whenever you're assigning a task to a team member, or you might have a template in your project management platform, you would just link to the system that's relevant. It talks about the how-to. How do you invoice someone? How do you pay wages? How do you onboard the client? And you would just link to the system at the point at which you're assigning the tasks. That's what kind of where the idea came from for System Hub, because we didn't have the solution. And then the more that I've kind of been doing it, I've realized the software's not enough. People need training. They need to know how to systemize. So that's where this idea of systemology came from. It's the system for systemizing a business. One thing I find with systems, because we've been doing it with hundreds of clients now and companies, is I find complexity is the enemy of systems and systemization. So the aim of the game really needs to be to simplify as much as possible. Anytime there's any sort of learning curve or a team member can't find what they're looking for when they need it, or it's not easy for them to edit or comment, or any sort of friction just becomes a reason not to do it and not to follow the process. So the aim of the game is not necessarily, it's almost counterintuitive. As we started building it up, we used to be building and thinking about all of these different features. And then the more that I did it, I realized that the features actually takes away from the outcome, that you actually want to find out what are the critical things that need to happen for this, and you don't put any more than that. Otherwise, you just, kind of the curve goes up, but then the curve goes down as far as the effectiveness.
Yes. I've actually heard another software developer talk about like only 10% of software is utilized by the users. So even the people who are the biggest advocates and users of that software will only use about 10%. And they may be using, two different people may be using a different 10% of it, but most of us will only ever like scratch the surface of these different softwares and platforms that are out there. So simple is better.
Yeah, anything to do with systems, even when you're designing them, and we talked about the minimum viable systems, that's part of it as well. Figure out what are the key systems that need to be in place for your business to function. Start there. Like if you can't do simple, you're not going to be able to do complex anyway. So why not try and nail simple first?
So as we wrap up today, any words of wisdom, like if you could go back and talk to yourself 17 years ago and give yourself a piece of advice based on what you know today in your business, what would you share?
I think the biggest thing really, and it was once that space was created, is just get very clear on that dream that you're trying to bring into reality as the business owner. Spend the time thinking about that. Craft it well, think about your values. Don't gloss over those things that at the time can feel airy-fairy, because that ends up forming the foundation. And I always had a bit of a challenge with it at the time, particularly with the dream, because I almost felt like I had to get it exactly right and it needed to be perfect, and I didn't want to lock into something. So I never really, maybe that was the perfectionist streak in me, but realizing you kind of, in life, it's a constant game of adjustment. So, you put it out there, you kind of head in that right direction, and then you might make some minor course corrections. But you do need some form of North Star to be heading towards. Otherwise, you could be going around in circles and you might not even notice it.
Wow. That's powerful to hold on to. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for all the experience and wisdom that you shared with us today.
Thank you for spending time with us today. Join our conversation in the Entrepreneurs Take Your Life Back Facebook community at tapthepotential.com/group. Share your aha moments from today's episode, ask me questions, and join in on the fun with your fellow entrepreneurs on the journey to designing sustainably profitable businesses that give you more time for what matters most and more money in your bank account than ever. And finally, share today's episode with a friend if you know a friend who would enjoy it. This is real life business. Keep your chin up, keep moving forward. You got this. If you're loving the Profit by Design podcast and have gotten any value out of it for your business or your life, would you mind doing two things? Subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode, and please leave us a review. Our listener reviews help us get into the top 10 of all entrepreneurship podcasts so that more entrepreneurs like you discover us. Your review is critical in helping us make a difference for more entrepreneurs who are ready to take their life back.